The first memory that lingers even after all these years is a quiet summer afternoon in our backyard, when I was barely 7. The sun was soft, golden through the branches of the old oak tree, and I can still hear the faint hum of the neighborhood, the distant laughter of children playing. My sisters, 3 of them older than me by varying stretches, were always there, a constant swirl of energy, conversation, and warmth. I remember standing at the edge of their world, a boy who loved them fiercely but felt like an outsider in their rhythm. They didn't exclude me, not consciously, but there was a kind of invisible line I could never cross. They were inseparable, their voices mingling in jokes, whispers, and secrets I could never fully understand. And I longed in ways I couldn't yet name, to belong as they belonged, to move through the world with the ease they had, unself-conscious and bright. I think it started subtly, as most things do. I would watch my sisters try on their clothes, their dresses flowing in ways I couldn't imagine for myself, their laughter filling the room. Sometimes I would linger in the doorway, pretending not to notice, just absorbing the shapes, colors, the way the fabric swirled and bounced with their movements. There was a quiet fascination, almost reverent, like watching sunlight catch a feather. I didn't call it curiosity or confusion. I simply felt a yearning to experience what they experienced, a desire to see the world through their perspective. The secret was mine alone, tucked into the small chambers of my heart, never spoken, only felt. And then, the first time I dared to cross that line, however briefly. I remember the day as if it had been etched in the fibers of my memory. My mother had taken the sisters to run errands, leaving the house hushed, echoing with the soft ticking of the old wall clock. I tiptoed to their room, a mix of guilt and exhilaration thrumming in my chest, and opened the drawer that held the delicate, fragrant fabric of a summer dress. It felt alien in my hands, yet inviting, almost comforting. With trembling fingers, I slipped it over my head, the cool material brushing my skin in a way that startled me with its softness. I looked at myself in the mirror. A boy, yes, but a boy transformed, or at least cloaked in the possibilities of being someone else, someone freer, lighter, more visible in ways I didn't yet understand. There was fear too, sharp and prickly, the fear of being caught, of being misunderstood, of my world unraveling. But for the first time, there was also a kind of joy, quiet and fragile, like the first notes of a song you've only just begun to hum to yourself. From that day, the ritual became a secret language I shared with myself. Not every day, not always, but enough to feel its rhythm, its hidden reassurance. I began noticing things more acutely. The way my sisters braided their hair, how they spoke to one another with whispers and knowing glances, how their laughter could fill a room and change its shape. I started to imitate, in small, almost imperceptible ways, tilting my head when I walked past the mirror, softening the way I spoke, lingering over motions that felt borrowed from them. My imagination became a bridge to their world, a place where I could belong without words. Yet with every secret pleasure came an undercurrent of anxiety. What if someone found out? Would my love for them, my wish to connect, become a source of shame? It was a delicate balance, the push and pull of desire and fear, and it shaped me in ways I would only recognize much later. As I grew older, those early secret moments began to shape how I saw myself, though I didn't have the language to describe it yet. By the time I was 10 or 11, the longing to be part of my sister's world had grown into a quiet, persistent ache. School felt different from home, of course. Boys ran and shouted, games were rough, and I tried to follow along, but there was always a small part of me that recoiled, wishing I could move with the grace, the ease, the subtle power that seemed to radiate from my sisters. At home, the sanctuary of our shared spaces, I found ways to explore that longing, to inhabit it in secret. I remember a rainy afternoon, one that began like any other, when my mother and father were absorbed in their own conversations in the living room, and my sisters were sprawled across the floor, painting and drawing. The house smelled of wet earth through the open windows, mixed with the faint perfume of crayons and the soap my sisters used. I slipped quietly to their room again, drawn to a drawer I had come to know intimately, as if it had become a trusted friend. I pulled out a blouse, soft and slightly worn from repeated washes, and held it against my chest. The fabric smelled faintly of them, a reminder of who they were, of the world I longed to touch. I hesitated, heart hammering. Then, slowly, I pulled it over my head. The sensation was familiar now, yet no less potent. I felt myself transform, not just in appearance but in the small, internal ways that mattered more. My posture, the tilt of my shoulders, the softening of my movements. In that moment, I wasn't just trying on clothes. I was trying on identity, possibility, courage. It was a strange, delicate liberation, and it frightened me as much as it thrilled me. And then, as I moved to the mirror, I saw not just a boy in my sister's blouse, but a boy beginning to understand himself, beginning to glimpse the person he could become if he allowed himself to dream without boundaries. Yet with every secret came the shadow of fear. I worried endlessly about discovery, about how my parents would react, about the whispers my peers might craft from fragments of truth they never fully knew. And at the same time, there was a deeper, quieter struggle. I had to reconcile this private yearning with the boy I was supposed to be. My sisters didn't suspect anything, though sometimes I thought I saw a flicker of knowing in their eyes. An intuition, a recognition of something I could not yet name. The ambiguity terrified me and comforted me in equal measure. It was in that tension, that dance between concealment and revelation, that I began learning the first lessons of courage and self-compassion, though I didn't know to call them that yet. I remember one evening when my father called me downstairs, the sun dipping low behind the house, painting the kitchen in long, warm shadows. He asked me about school, about friends, about the neighborhood kids. I smiled, gave the usual responses, but inside I felt a kind of emptiness, a silent separation from the person I longed to be. That night, lying in bed, I thought of my sisters, their laughter echoing through the hallways, the smell of their hair and soap, the soft curves of their dresses I had once held against me. And I realized, with a clarity that startled me, that my longing was not just curiosity. It was a part of who I was. That realization was both terrifying and beautiful, and it marked the beginning of a journey that would unfold slowly, painfully, but inevitably toward self-understanding. By the time adolescence truly took hold, the world had grown sharper. Voices were louder, judgments heavier, expectations more defined. Boys teased, sisters whispered, and I began to feel the edges of my secret fray under the pressures of growing up. But still I found solace in my private moments. The quiet afternoons, the rainy evenings, the small, unobserved rituals of dressing in borrowed clothing, they became acts of courage, of self-respect, of care. I started journaling, writing my thoughts in careful, looping script, hiding the notebooks beneath my bed. I wrote about fear, about longing, about the sense that I was not yet whole. And in the act of writing, of observing myself, I began to see patterns, to recognize that this was not a fleeting whim but a profound, enduring part of my identity. And yet, as much as I grew in understanding, there was still a shadowed fear that lingered. What if my world, the one I loved and depended on, could not accept this? What if the sisters I adored, the family that nurtured me, turned away from me once they knew? Those fears, persistent and unspoken, shaped the quiet rhythm of my adolescence, teaching me patience, teaching me the slow, careful art of waiting for the right time, the right moment to step into truth without shattering what I held dear. It was a delicate balance, a lifetime condensed into fleeting moments, and I carried it as both burden and guide, as I would carry it for many years to come. By the time I reached my mid-teens, the quiet ache of secrecy had grown heavier, but so had my understanding of who I was. High school brought new pressures, new routines, and a constant undercurrent of self-consciousness. I tried to blend in, to perform the part of the boy everyone expected me to be, but the private rituals I had nurtured for years, slipping into my sister's clothes when no one was watching, studying the nuances of their gestures, their laughter, the way they carried themselves, had become something essential, something that I could no longer ignore. I could no longer live entirely in their shadows. I had to find a way to let that secret self breathe, even if only in fragments. One of the most vivid memories from this time was a quiet Saturday afternoon. The house was unusually still, my parents busy with errands, my sisters scattered in their own worlds. I found myself drawn, as always, to their room, to the drawer of dresses and blouses that had come to feel like a portal. This time, however, I approached with a different intention. I wasn't just curious. I wanted to feel the courage to sit with myself fully, to allow my reflection to see me not as a boy trying on a borrowed identity, but as a person discovering a genuine part of who I was. I slipped into a soft dress, one of my sister's favorites, and moved toward the mirror. The reflection that looked back startled me. The person I saw had layers now: fragility, longing, and an unmistakable quiet dignity. I recognized myself in a way that had never been possible before. It was not imitation anymore. It was acknowledgement. The first time I allowed a friend to see me in this way, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. It was subtle: a casual visit, a borrowed scarf, a carefully chosen blouse. But when they complimented me, something shifted. For the first time, I experienced the fragile joy of recognition beyond my family, a validation that did not come from secrecy alone. And yet, the fear remained. Fear of misunderstanding, fear of rejection, fear that revealing this part of myself might unravel the delicate tapestry of love and connection I had built with my sisters and my parents. That fear, though daunting, became a guide. It taught me empathy, patience, and the quiet courage of living authentically in small, careful increments. At home, the dynamic with my sisters began to shift, too, though it was subtle and unconscious at first. They noticed my quiet admiration for them, the way I lingered a little longer over hairstyles, the gentle way I tried on small aspects of their world. Sometimes I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in their eyes, a curiosity that mirrored my own. I remember one afternoon, my eldest sister catching me mid-gesture, holding one of her dresses against my chest. I froze, expecting laughter, scolding, or worse. Instead, she smiled softly, said nothing, and left the room. That single, silent moment became a quiet anchor. It was as if she had given me permission without words, a subtle acknowledgement that my secret was not shameful. It was the first time I truly felt seen by someone I loved, and it stayed with me, a gentle light in the darker corners of my adolescent uncertainty. There were setbacks, of course. High school was rarely kind to anyone who seemed different. I learned early to guard my private life fiercely. Rumors and misunderstandings could spread like wildfire, and I learned the art of navigating the world with a dual existence, one visible, one hidden. The duality was exhausting at times, a constant negotiation of identity, but it also taught me resilience, creativity, and a profound capacity for empathy. I understood what it meant to carry a secret that mattered deeply, and how such a secret could both isolate and protect you. Amid these struggles, I also discovered moments of profound joy. Small, intimate victories, perfectly arranging a borrowed outfit, hearing a quiet compliment from someone I trusted, feeling the fabric against my skin as the sun streamed through a window, became rituals of affirmation. They reminded me that identity was not fixed, that who we are can be shaped by love, care, and courage. These moments, subtle and fleeting, laid the foundation for the person I would eventually become. Someone capable of both vulnerability and strength, someone willing to embrace the hidden parts of themselves without fear. And through it all, my sisters remained a constant, sometimes unknowingly guiding me, sometimes gently nudging me toward understanding. They never judged, never demanded conformity beyond what was natural for our family, and in their quiet, persistent presence, I learned that belonging is not about imitation but about recognition, about allowing oneself to inhabit a space of authenticity even when it is fragile. The long, winding path of adolescence became a slow, emotional education in courage, empathy, and the intricate, beautiful ways identity can unfold. Early adulthood arrived softly, without fanfare, but it brought a new weight of reflection. By now, I was in my early 20s, and the quiet rituals of adolescence had grown into a deeper, more deliberate practice of self-discovery. College life, with its new freedoms and unexpected challenges, gave me space to explore myself more fully, but it also forced me to confront fears I had long tucked away. The world outside the family home was larger, more judgmental, yet also strangely more forgiving in its anonymity. I discovered that I could walk through spaces unseen, yet remain profoundly present to myself. I could dress in ways that felt true, navigate my identity in private, and begin to notice the subtle power of simply being honest, even if only with myself. I often returned home to visit my sisters, drawn by a longing that never faded. Their presence was comforting, grounding, a reminder of the earliest moments when I first began to understand myself. They had their own lives now, each moving forward in ways that were independent but connected to the fabric of our shared history. And yet, the household still held the quiet magic of my childhood, the smells, the sounds, the light through the windows, the world in which my secret had first taken shape. Those visits became a kind of emotional anchor, a place where I could reflect on how far I had come and how far I still had to go. One evening, I found myself alone in my old bedroom, now partially empty with my sister's things gradually moving elsewhere. I opened the familiar drawer where I had first experimented with clothing so many years ago. The fabrics smelled faintly of time, of memories, of the tender love and connection that had surrounded me. I held one of the blouses against me, and the familiar rush of emotion washed over me. Nostalgia, longing, and an almost painful awareness of how delicate and precious identity can be. I realized that these objects were not just clothes. They were talismans, symbols of a journey that had taken decades to understand. And in that quiet moment, I felt a profound gratitude for every secret, every small act of courage, every gentle step toward authenticity. I began to reflect more deeply on the lessons my journey had taught me. Life had a strange way of demanding both courage and patience, and my experiences had given me a unique perspective on love, empathy, and the quiet resilience of the human spirit. I understood, perhaps for the first time, that the secret I had carried for so long was not shameful. It was a bridge to understanding myself and others. Every fear I had faced, every anxious moment when I felt the world might reject me, had strengthened me in ways I could not have anticipated. And slowly, I began to see that the transformation I had longed for was not about appearances, but about the heart, about the courage to be true to oneself, about the capacity to love without condition, and about the grace to accept change. There were still challenges, of course. Not every friend, every encounter, every family interaction was easy. I learned that disclosure had to be gradual, careful, and deliberate. Some people could not understand. Some reacted with confusion or discomfort, and yet others responded with warmth and acceptance that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The contrast between fear and courage, secrecy and openness, shaped me profoundly. I began to understand that identity is never static. It is a living, evolving conversation between the self and the world, and the act of living authentically requires both patience and bravery. My sisters, now fully adults with their own lives, continued to be a mirror in subtle ways. They never forced understanding, never imposed judgment. But their quiet acceptance, their ability to inhabit their own identities fully, created a safe space in which I could continue to explore mine. It was in their presence, in their laughter and familiarity, that I first truly felt the possibility of being whole. I realized that the transformation I had longed for, quiet, emotional, identity-focused, was not a sudden change, but a gradual unfolding, nurtured by love, reflection, and the courage to embrace the hidden parts of oneself. And in those reflective hours, sitting quietly with the past and present intertwined, I understood something vital. That the journey itself, with all its fears, joys, and discoveries, was the true transformation. The secret that had once felt like a burden had become a guiding light, a testament to resilience, empathy, and the quiet power of embracing one's authentic self. Every choice, every moment of hesitation or courage, had led me to a place of deeper understanding, a place where I could finally feel, in the softest, truest sense, that I belonged not just among my sisters but within myself. By the time I entered my late 20s, the rhythm of my life had begun to settle into something both quiet and profound. I was no longer chasing fleeting glimpses of identity in secret. I was living them, however privately, with a growing sense of purpose and acceptance. The rituals of my youth, the borrowed dresses, the careful imitations of my sister's movements, the quiet conversations I had with my reflection, had evolved into something far deeper. They were no longer mere acts of curiosity or longing. They had become a language of self-understanding, a gentle conversation between who I was and who I aspired to be. I remember one particular evening when the house was filled with the comforting hum of everyday life. My sisters were around, laughing quietly over a shared memory, my parents reading or preparing for the week ahead. I found myself drawn once again to the old drawer, now even emptier than before, but still carrying faint traces of the past. I picked up a blouse I had worn countless times over the years and held it against myself. The fabric was soft, worn, imbued with memory, and in that simple gesture, I felt the full weight of decades of longing, fear, discovery, and courage. Tears came without warning, and I realized that I was mourning and celebrating all at once. The loss of innocence, the complexity of growth, the subtle victory of having survived the quiet trials of identity. This period also brought a deeper awareness of connection and empathy. I began to understand that my experiences, secret, delicate, and sometimes frightening, had shaped a capacity for understanding others that I had not possessed before. I could sense the quiet struggles of friends, the unspoken fears of colleagues, the invisible burdens carried by people who smiled while their hearts ached. I had learned in the most intimate way that identity is not a fixed thing imposed by the world, but a living, evolving tapestry that we all navigate, often in silence. And with that realization came a gentle, profound sense of responsibility. To live authentically, to be visible in my own way, and to offer the kind of quiet acceptance to others that I had longed for myself. There were moments, of course, when the old fears returned. An unanticipated glance, a misunderstood comment, a fleeting judgment. But those moments no longer carried the same weight. I had learned to anchor myself in the truth of my own experience, to breathe through the anxiety, to remind myself that acceptance, first and foremost, begins within. I began sharing small truths with those I trusted, noticing the subtle but powerful ways that honesty could deepen relationships rather than threaten them. And slowly, quietly, I began to understand that the world could hold my truth without shattering me, that the secret I had carried for so long could coexist with love, connection, and family. My sisters, now fully formed in their own lives, remained central to this understanding. One afternoon, as we sat together reminiscing about childhood memories, the games, the small misunderstandings, the quiet moments of joy, I felt a clarity I had never felt before. I realized that the bonds I had longed to inhabit, the intimacy I had pursued in secret, had always been present in different forms. My desire to belong to their world had, in truth, been a desire to belong fully to myself, to honor the parts of me that were tender, perceptive, and courageous. And in that quiet revelation, I felt a profound gratitude, an almost spiritual sense of completeness that comes only after years of careful, patient self-discovery. The lessons of this time were subtle but transformative. I learned that identity is not a sudden revelation but a lifelong conversation, one that requires patience, empathy, courage, and above all, gentleness toward oneself. I understood that the moments of fear, the stolen glances, the private experiments with fabric and gesture, were not signs of weakness but seeds of resilience, each one shaping the person I was becoming. And I realized that true transformation is not about changing who you are to fit the world, but about embracing who you are in ways that allow you to move through the world with integrity, love, and quiet confidence. And so, in those years I began to live more fully, with a steady, peaceful awareness of my journey. I moved with the soft, unspoken dignity I had admired in my sisters, carrying the lessons of my secret past like precious keepsakes. I embraced both my fears and my joys, my hesitations and my small victories, understanding that each had been necessary to reach this place of quiet wholeness. And in that embrace, I found a depth of peace I had never known in my youth. A peace born not from perfection, but from the honest, courageous act of being true to oneself. As I moved into my 30s, the quiet transformation I had carried within me for so long had become a living, breathing part of who I was. The secret that had once been a source of tension, a careful, delicate weight on my shoulders, had shifted into something entirely different. It was no longer hidden, though it was still deeply personal. It was a thread woven into the fabric of my identity, a testament to the decades of reflection, courage, and patient self-discovery that had shaped me. And with this shift came a profound sense of freedom, not the loud, triumphant freedom of a sudden revelation, but a gentle, enduring freedom of knowing and accepting oneself fully. I often think back to the earliest days, when I first slipped into my sister's clothes, trembling with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Those moments, so small and seemingly inconsequential at the time, were seeds of an understanding that would only bloom slowly, over years filled with quiet observation, introspection, and courage. I realize now that the longing I felt was never simply about clothing or imitation. It was about empathy, about connection, about finding a way to inhabit the world with the same grace, care, and attentiveness that my sisters did so effortlessly. And through that lens, I understand that the transformation I experienced was never about changing who I was, but about uncovering the self that had always existed beneath layers of fear, doubt, and societal expectation. Family remained central to this journey. My sisters, who had once seemed so far beyond my reach, had become mirrors of resilience, courage, and quiet confidence. Our relationships deepened as we grew older, evolving into bonds of mutual understanding that required no explanation. They never judged, never demanded, and in their unwavering presence, I found a model for the acceptance I needed to give myself. Our shared laughter, memories, and small, everyday interactions became a gentle affirmation of belonging, not just within the family, but within the larger, complicated world of identity and self-expression. The fears of adolescence, the stolen glances, the hidden garments and whispered reflections, had not disappeared entirely. They lingered, as memories do, sometimes surfacing in quiet moments of doubt or self-reflection. But they no longer held power over me. I had learned that fear and courage can coexist, that vulnerability can be a source of strength, and that authenticity is not a single moment of revelation but a lifetime of careful, intentional choices. I could dress, move, and express myself in ways that felt right, knowing that my worth was not defined by conformity or societal expectation but by the quiet, enduring truth of my own heart. In those years, I also began to understand the subtle life lessons embedded in my journey. I learned that identity is fluid, complex, and beautiful, that empathy and understanding are cultivated through lived experience, and that courage is often quiet, patient, and persistent rather than bold and immediate. I realized that the process of becoming oneself is never linear. It twists and turns, pauses, retreats, and surges forward in unpredictable ways. And yet, every step, every hesitation, every small act of self-recognition contributes to the unfolding of a life that is whole, authentic, and deeply human. Looking back now, I see the transformation in its fullest sense. It is not the act of wearing a blouse, adjusting a hairstyle, or mimicking a gesture. It is the slow, tender evolution of understanding oneself, the patient learning of what it means to live fully in the body, mind, and heart that are uniquely yours. It is the acceptance of fear as part of growth, the embrace of joy as a companion to struggle, and the quiet recognition that belonging begins within. I have become, in the most meaningful sense, one of those I admired, not by imitating them but by carrying their lessons, their grace, and their courage into the way I live and move through the world. And so, I carry these memories, the small triumphs, the secret moments, the quiet fears, the tender victories, like soft lanterns illuminating the path I have traveled. They remind me that transformation is not a destination but a journey, that courage and love are intertwined, and that the truest form of self-discovery is a gentle, enduring dialogue with one's own heart. I am grateful for the journey, for my sisters, for the secret that once seemed so heavy but ultimately became the guide to the life I now live with quiet pride, authenticity, and peace. And in sharing this story, I hope it offers a small reminder to anyone listening that our hidden selves are often the parts most worth honoring, and that the journey toward self-acceptance, though slow and sometimes daunting, is a path toward a quiet, radiant freedom that touches every part of life. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.